And it's just like that, a catchy tune. And I don't think that the recording got any of the intro. But, oh, heck, this is take two where we're actually recording. So, welcome to the McC Wanders podcast. This time we are talking about travel. I've got two terrific guests with me. First is Jenni Duncan. Jenni is my significant other. And next is a return guest, Jody McCann, who has been with me on at least one. I think we may have broken it into two podcasts. Jody, welcome back.
Hi, Mark. Hi, Jen.
Hey.
So we just got back from a trip to Ireland and spent a number of days over there. And so we thought we'd get together and talk a little bit about the trip, how cool it was, any things we didn't like or fell in love with, etc. So Jenni is a funeral director by trade, but has a side hustle as the executive director of the Owen County, Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. And so, Jenni, why don't you tell us about how Chamber arranges these trips and a little about it?
All right. So many chambers across the nation offer Infinity Travel, and it's where they work with a tour company that offers travel abroad. Some of them will actually do travel stateside also. This was our second trip through Indus Travel. Indus.com, Mark, is that?
Indus.travel.
Indus.travel, sorry, is their website if you want to check them out. So they coordinate with chambers of commerce to push travel into their communities. This was our second trip, like I said, and the third trip is already scheduled. So we've had very good experiences with them and hope to continue that partnership.
Cool. So we had we had 25 people come, 24, including Jenni and I, flew from Northern Kentucky, Cincinnati, Greater Cincinnati Airport, CVG. We went to Newark. There's Pearl the Wonder Woman.
Pearl.
And from Newark, we flew directly into Dublin. Jody, you had a different route. What did you do?
I took the bus. Since I was by myself, I took the bus to Chicago and then flew direct from O'Hare to Dublin.
And the bus was from Madison, Wisconsin.
Correct.
How long a ride is that in the bus?
It's I think they schedule the bus for about 2.5 hours, and it's 2:15, 2:20, somewhere in there. I think they give themselves a little bit of time. It's a good way to go, and it's not expensive.
Sure. So we all had a little time the first day to explore in the Dublin area. So my first stop was McDonald's. As we talked about in version 1 of this, where I didn't have the record button going, the large Diet Coke I had to have was $3.70 euros plus tax. I think it probably, and the exchange rate was probably around $4.50 US for what it ended up costing me. And it was slightly smaller than a medium McDonald's Diet Coke in the States. The one thing we did do is Jenni is kind of a bourbon aficionado, so we had time on the first day to visit Jameson. We looked at Guinness too, but Jameson seemed easier to get to and was kind of on our timeline. So, Jenni, how'd you enjoy the Jameson trip?
I loved the Jameson trip. In fact, in honor of Ireland tonight, we're having a little Jameson ginger and lime in my RBG cup, my Descent cup. Jameson was just a really cool experience to see how it started, how long it's been in existence, and how well they took care of their employees. Jameson and Guinness both pretty much built a city for their employees, housing, education, healthcare, all of those sorts of things. So it's just really cool to see where it started and for how long it's been in existence. And one of the things I came away with is, the thing that makes Kentucky bourbon so good is the limestone. Well, it turns out that the thing that makes Jameson so tasty is the limestone. So clearly they know what they're doing.
Yeah,
I would say also that everybody that I talked to who chose to go the other way and went to Guinness also enjoyed their, going to Guinness and doing that tour.
Yeah, it did sound like the Guinness tour was just as rewarding in terms of learning about the history of the area and stuff like that.
One of the things I will mention is that on the Jameson tour, there was a tasting towards the end of it. And so there were pretty much 3 little shots of Jameson whiskey in different flavors and stuff. And so our tour guide, who was very knowledgeable, was like, do not drive a car after you take these. And he was absolutely right on that. And then as part of the tour also, and I think it was about €31, Mark, is that right?
Yeah.
It seemed like it was about €31 a piece, but you did a tasting on it, and then at the end of it, you got an actual full-size drink. So you could have 2 fingers of Jameson. You could have Jameson ginger and lime, which has become one of my new favorites, or you could have orange Jameson with Sprite and maybe lime, which all of them I think were very tasty.
Yeah, and the tour was well worth the money because you've got a lot of the Irish history, some of it related to the distillery and some of it not related. So just kind of the stuff that went on.
They did a really good job talking about like single pot distilling and all of the different distilling techniques too.
I did something different. I actually went to the General Post Office, which was the site of the Easter uprising, the real start of the rebellion to separate Ireland from England. And they have a history museum there that was really well done too.
Yeah, that seemed cool. And then we'll get towards the end, the Epic Museum as well. So there are tons of cool places to go, and we just scratched the surface.
I will say that our tour guide, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No.
Our tour guide, Marianne, she was amazing. She knew so many things. I don't know how she retained all of that information, but it was so cool to have somebody who was so ingrained in the history and to be so passionate about the history of it all. And she shared with us, there was one day that we visited a bog village, and there was a home that was very much like her grandmother's was. And just to hear her talk about it, and in school you learn about the potato famine, and to hear Marian's take on that was just really eye-opening, because it wasn't a potato famine. It was pretty much genocide. It was the starving of an entire nation. Yep. Where they were sending out 700 ships a day of food while their people in Ireland were starving. So that was just really interesting to hear a real perspective on it instead of what you're taught or what you've read in a book.
And I did find that the frankness that went on throughout the tour was very nice to hear, the unvarnished truth, as opposed to, I have been on a number of tours over my career. Jody and I spent a lot of time together traveling and with work, and a lot of those tours were all mom, apple pie, and Chevrolet. They were all very glossy friendly, and none of the real truths of history.
And I will say that Marianne did a very nice job of telling ugly things in the kindest way possible, but not sugarcoating the truth.
Yeah, I talked to her before you guys got there. I happened to run into her in the hotel lobby, and it was really funny because the hotel, I had said, yeah, I just want to go walk around and see some things. The hotel directed me to an art gallery, and she was like, well, I don't really care that much for art, but I really like history. And so we talked a little bit about the history, and that's why she sent me to the GPO. But I found throughout the whole tour that she was really knowledgeable about the history, and it was very enjoyable that way.
Did you do the Bog Village, Jody?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Mark,
Yeah.
Mark set that one out, but just her take on all of that was really interesting.
Well,
That was at
I saw
the
things, we didn't have turf cutters, but I saw things that were in my grandparents' house and barn before I moved to town, and so it was a very interesting stop.
Some similarities,
And
yeah.
my in-laws had goat farms, and the guy there knew a lot about goats in Ireland, so that was interesting to talk to him too.
That was in Glen Bay, where we stopped to do that at the Red Fox Inn.
Yeah, let's jump in and let's maybe dive into that a little more detail. So the first day we started the tour, we jumped out and we went. I guess we were in the Cork area, so we went down and visited the Blarney Castle. So that's the castle in the background for those of you that are watching this on video. But that was a really cool area. I mean, it was running streams and of course everything was green over there, but really nice gardens and stuff like that. And then Jody, you and Jenny went up and kissed or attempted to kiss
Not each other.
the Blarney Stone.
We both kissed the Blarney Stone, so we'll
We
never
did.
be without words.
We did.
I
Well, when
actually
I
would
got
never
home, my
expect
wife
either of you to be without
I needed
words.
it.
What was that, Jody?
When I got home, my wife said, "You didn't need to do that."
Same.
Oh,
So I guess that's always true. Maybe those of us who can blab do it anyway. And Mark, I will say that I'm not a small person, but when I walked up that spiral staircase, you would have been overly enclosed, I guess is a nice way to put it.
well, I headed up. Yeah, I headed up, and then Jenny gave me the 411, and I was like, I think I'll turn around and go down and
I
take
turned around
pictures.
and I was like, with love, I don't think this is for you.
Yeah, being tall and fat and having big feet. I'm not a fan of small steps, and sounded like even some of the steps were a little bit challenging.
So
at the
those
top.
steps were about 4 inches wide on their biggest side and no inches wide on their smallest side, and a rope bolted to the concrete. Well, not concrete, the rock,
rail.
I guess.
Yeah.
Was your handrail, and so it was narrow and steep.
I thought that was one of the interesting things, though, that when they're talking about the direction that it spiraled, if you were above, you were looking down on the guy coming up with the sword, and his sword was in his wrong hand. Since
You had to hold
people
on.
were
Most people were
right-handed.
right-handed, and so you had to hold on with your right hand. And so as you were coming up the stairs, you would have come up with your left hand, which you wouldn't have been swinging a sword with. So it was
Right.
a safer way.
And I think the stories like that are what made Marion and having a tour guide like that so well worth doing it this way. Is you got all the insights along the way at each stop that I don't think you would have gotten any other way.
Can we talk about
Okay,
Eddie a
yeah.
minute?
Go ahead.
Can we just talk about Eddie, our bus driver, a minute?
Go ahead.
Sure.
So we have this suspicion that Eddie is a mobster in real life.
Yeah.
He drove this luxury motor coach at 62.4 miles an hour across a tiny little back road dodging sheep. And so it was go as fast as you can and then step on the brakes to dodge the sheep, and then go as fast as you can and step on the brakes to dodge the sheep. And
Yeah.
there was one time I guess we were coming into Killarney, that somebody had just kind of abandoned their bus in the middle of the road. And I was certain that we were all going to have to pile off the bus and help Eddie in that skirmish.
Yeah, and he was, I don't remember the relief bus driver's name for the one day.
Ruh.
Yeah, but I will say that the relief driver had a much steadier foot than Eddie did.
But he wasn't nearly as entertaining as Eddie was.
He was not near. I would have never wanted to give up Eddie, but there was a lot of hurry up, stop, hurry up, stop. So I don't know if you noticed any of that, Jody. I'm especially sensitive to that.
So am I.
So the first night after on the road. So the first night outside of Dublin.
Can I say one more thing about Marion?
Yeah.
Before we go on, one of the things that I thought was really cool, which I took to heart and had an impact on me, was when she said she'd been in this country a lot, 22 trips to the U.S. and as Mark knows, I'm a country music DJ, and I really like country music. And she is also a country music fan. And then she sang us the verse of 40 Shades of Green, which I didn't know that song. And, it's a Johnny Cash song. And
I didn't know it either.
I really sort of pride myself on that. So, of course, when I got home, I did my radio show. I did songs that I heard in Ireland or songs that I heard about in Ireland or somebody mentioned. And so I had to start my show with Johnny Cash doing a verse from 40 Shades of Green. And the next week I actually found a song or found Roseanne Cash doing the entire song. Johnny Cash never put that song on an album. It was the B-side of the Rebel Johnny Yuma. But anyway, that song became an earwig for me. I got it stuck in my head and thought it was really cool that she sang the whole verse.
And I enjoyed what you sent us. I shared that with Jenny.
Yeah, that was really cool. I love old country music, and so that was neat to hear the actual recording because, like you, I had never heard it before until she mentioned it. Yeah. And it was a really cool take on it because as you were flying in and you could see all of those little patches of green, it literally was, and 40 was an underestimate, I think, but
oh yeah,
there were just, dozens and dozens and dozens of shades of green.
Well, and I thought the little story of Johnny Cash saying he had a road map of Ireland and he was trying to rhyme the names of the cities.
Yeah, which is what songwriters do. So that was a fun story.
Yeah.
So we did spend some time in Woolen Mills before we left for Killarney, and then we spent the night in Killarney. What were the things? I know at least Jenny and I really love Killarney. What stood out to you, Jenny, in terms of the town?
Well, first, let me back up to the Woolen Mills because in Owen County, I think there is a new uniform for everybody that's been on the trip because I think dozens of them mailed stuff back home. When we got back, I went to my first chamber meeting after that, and Sandy Bush had on almost the very same poncho that I bought, but in a slightly different shade. And I was like, I think this might be the uniform. And she was like, we mailed it home, and it was so easy. And there were several other folks that did the very same thing, so that was kind of cool.
I wore my sweater home.
Good. Yeah, they were really cool. In Killarney, I loved the small community feel of that. Dublin was very much a big city, but Killarney felt like a community. There was one night that I had gone out. Mark had stayed at the hotel. I went out with friends for dinner, But then, like, I peeled off from them after dinner and went to a couple of places by myself and felt incredibly safe, incredibly secure. Like, didn't even second guess that at all. And had ice cream by myself because the ice cream in Ireland is just not like anything else I've ever tasted.
Jody, what about you? And anything stand out in Killarney?
Well, I really like the fact that you could walk down the street, go in, and if you didn't like the music in pub A, you went to pub B, and if you didn't like it in B, you went to pub C. So when I did songs I heard in Ireland, I picked out songs. I mean, and they were everything from Irish folk songs to Buddy Holly. So it was I really liked that a lot. And let's see, wasn't it in Killarney where we went for the ride in the whatever the cars are called, the with the horse carriages,
Yeah, the jauntings,
jaunting cars?
the
Yeah,
jaunting cars.
yeah. And the the kid the kid driving our wagon or jaunting car was a stitch. He was 16 years old and had to come right after school to do it. And we heard from Marion that it's a family business and that everybody in the family gets involved. But he was a stitch. He was really funny.
And then we had dinner, and I think was the Laurel or the Laurels,
Yeah.
and wasn't much on the menu I could eat, but you all seemed to enjoy your dinners, and it looked good.
Well, that was an interesting thing that I learned, Mark. I didn't really realize that the batter on the fish, that the fish and chips often have mustard in them. That was a revelation to me.
And I haven't run across that here, so that may be, I don't know if it's an Irish thing or a European thing or what, but yeah. So I did have the slaw that was outstanding, but I didn't get to have the fish and chips. And then we went a few um, storefronts down and stopped in and had a drink at a place and listened to, I guess, what I would call live American music. He was playing cover songs, and that was enjoyable.
Did I think that night, or maybe it was the next night, went back to the hotel and there were three women playing in the bar in the hotel, and they were actually quite good.
That was that night. So I had a hamburger at that place at the bar at the hotel,
As
and
they were closing.
yeah, as they were closing, and yeah, so they were playing, I guess, more traditional classic
They played like
music.
that traditional Irish drum, and they were playing a flute, pipe, whatever.
Yeah, there was a woman who played. Um, well, one woman only played fiddle, but one played fiddle and mandolin, and one played guitar and the penny whistle, I think. And I
So
thought,
the
That
next
might
day,
have been the night that my auntie drank in the bar with the bus driver and requested her own bottle of Jameson when we returned home.
yeah,
Mary
she
Kay.
was holding court for sure. Um, so the next day, I'm going to have you all carry this one because I had a little illness, and so the next day was Ring of Kerry, and what I remember most about that is trying to survive the bus ride. So, Jenny, why don't you lead us in, and Jody, you provide color commentary on the Ring of Kerry.
So the Ring of Kerry was kind of a bus tour around a region. So we started in like central eastern Ireland, went south, went north to the east side, and then kind of looped back over to the west side in the whole course of the trip. So we stopped for lunch in a town called Waterville, which was amazing. They had this beach that was just full of like these purple rocks, like this reddish purple rock that was just absolutely beautiful. It was cold and windy and all of those things, but it was still an amazing view, and all of these little colorful houses. And we had a really good lunch there. We actually ate outdoors in the midst of all of this weather, but you didn't notice that it was bad weather, just the way that it was designed. Um, and I think that was the day that we did the Bog Village tour, and we stopped at the Red Fox Inn. And then they had
Free
Irish
Irish
coffee.
coffee.
Yeah, they had Irish coffee if you wanted it. I think that was also the day that we stopped at some shopping area too, wasn't it, Jody? The Clattering place.
Yeah, McC or
Yeah,
McC.
and
Yeah,
they gave you free Irish coffee there too. And
So what is Irish coffee?
so Irish coffee is coffee with Jameson and cream and brown sugar.
Hmm. Not being a coffee guy, I didn't try any. Jody, did you drink any?
nope.
Supposedly, the brown sugar takes away the bitter taste of coffee, and it started during a war of some sort. I'm sorry, I'm not really good at that stuff. Whatever that was, I didn't pay good attention, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And there was an innkeeper who wanted to warm up the soldiers that were coming in, and he was like, fix something up. And so it was a coffee with whiskey, and then the brown sugar was supposed to help with the bitterness of the coffee. And then the cream is what really sets it apart, because all of the dairy products in Ireland are just absolutely amazing. All of the cattle are grass fed, and all of the rain just leads to this really rich grass that they feed on. And even in times when they can't be outdoors, they're still fed on grass that's been harvested. So their dairy products are just amazing, which leads to the goodness of the ice cream, the Irish coffees. There was a time further on in the trip that we had, part of us had hot chocolate with Bailey's in it and good cream, and that was actually awesome too.
So we were back in Killarney again that night too, right?
We
Second
did 2
night.
nights in Killarney.
So Jody, didn't you go to an event that night?
I did. It was very interesting. It was, I think, a total of 10 people, and in a hotel ballroom that was, a few blocks from where we were staying. They had turned the hotel ballroom into a stage area. They put risers, and then they had a small stage, and they had like 10 different people. They had a woman who was a very good singer, and then they had musicians, a guy who played accordion, a woman who played fiddle, and actually, to my mind, the best musician in the bunch was actually the drummer. This drummer played the bodhrán, and also he played flute. And then they had 4 dancers, and the dancers were actually really interesting because they had 2 guys and 2 women. And the women, there was one that was really small and one that was really tall. And then the guys, one was tall and one was short. And they did all these various combinations. And the dancers were just world class. They were very, very good. So it was kind of a variety show, and they had some some poetry and some songs and dance numbers. And the drummer also played the bodhrán and was spectacular. So it was really fun.
Good deal. So the next go ahead, Jenny.
I was just going to say that it was interesting on this trip because Jody talking about going to that reminds me of Mackenzie that attended that. And so we had such an array of ages on this trip. We had a
Shelby.
13-year-old. Yeah, we had a 13-year-old young man. We had a 16-year-old young lady, Shelby, who went. We had another young lady who was 25. She graduated with my son, which was interesting. And then we had all the way up to, I think 79 was the oldest on the trip. So
I think he was 78. We talked
78.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was just such an array, but there was something for everybody. And interestingly, Shelby even said on this trip, when we were talking about what was scheduled next, they had talked about doing a trip with the school to England, and she looked at her mom and she said, "Mom, I'd rather travel with these people than the school people." And so that just felt like a ringing endorsement to me that, if a 16-year-old wants to go somewhere with us older folk, that just seemed like we did something right.
I thought it was a good mix of people that seemed to enjoy each other's company.
Mm-hmm. And I will also say that it was all walks of life. I mean, we didn't all think the same way. We didn't all believe the same beliefs, but yet in this trip, like, everybody came together and had a really good time.
So the next morning we got up and headed towards the Cliffs of Moher via a ferry. So we had to wait for a while. So Jody and I did some walking out on the causeway, I guess you'd call that.
Yeah.
And then we jumped on the Shannon Breeze, which was pretty cool.
It was quite a breeze too.
It was very breezy, but very efficient. You rolled up, you got on, they were ready to go, and Marion or Eddie, one of them, made sure to tell us all, when you see us getting ready to arrive at the other side, you need to be on the bus and ready to go, because when they pull up,
we're leaving.
They want us off here. So I thought that was really highly effective, and I don't know how many trips a day those do, but
I think that cut about 2.5 hours off our trip too. Being able to cross there cut off a lot of road trip.
So, and then we ended up at the Cliffs of Moher. So Jody, had you been here before?
No, I had not. My previous trips to Ireland, really, we went all the way to the north, and then we went to the west, but mostly the northwest. So really, I hadn't been much south of, say, Galway. So for me, it was filling in the south and the southwest.
So I had a healthcare appointment today, and the healthcare professional shared that when she went many years ago, that their tour guide shared that this was a very common occurrence at the Cliffs of Moher, was where people came to jump.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah,
I'd heard that.
Yeah, so and she went on to tell. So it sounded like a number of years ago the fencing and the walls and the security were not as available as they were on our trip. So they said, she said it was a thing. I mean, it was well known.
So when Jody and I walked to the left side, I thought that it went around further, and there were like big caution signs, like "Do not enter, enter at your own risk." Like, this is not a part of the park. Do not go here. So it felt like the terrain got a little treacherous on to that left side of it. And then as you got more towards that watchtower, the closer you got to it, like, the wind just really kicked up. I mean, your hair was standing on end. Jody's hair was a mess. It was awful. But it was, the views were just amazing. That experience is the one when people are like, what was your most favorite thing? It sounds very cliche, but it was the Cliffs of Moher, because it's one of those things that you can describe, and I can show you a picture, but until you've seen it with your own eyeballs, you just can't imagine it.
Yeah, I thought it was super cool. I enjoyed it. I would have not wanted to miss that. That was, I think we talked about this on the trip. It's kind of like every time I see Hoover Dam, I'm in awe that somebody could build that. But I'm in awe that it was built when it was built. And then you go back and just look at something natural like this, and you're like, just wow. Mm-hmm. Just wow.
Yeah.
And the other thing, so had a couple of conversations back from the trip, and I'm amazed at things that are hundreds and thousands of years old over there that are still functional and used every day. And I'll say this without any feeling of regret. And yet, we have people that can't use a sports stadium more than 15 or 20 years without losing their shit
Yeah.
and wanting to have a new one. So
I think we were in Galway and we were talking about a bridge there in Galway that was, I don't know how many years old, but it was just, I mean, it was beautiful and it was magnificent and there wasn't a chip out of it. And then we talk about the bridges here crossing from Kentucky to Ohio that just can't withstand the test of time. And those have been there for hundreds of years.
Hundreds and hundreds. I think that there was one bridge that actually was built in Norman times. So, 1066 or say 1100.
Yeah.
yeah, so super, super cool. So we got on the bus there and headed for our night in Limerick. So I know that, Jenni, did you have an event?
I went to the castle. Yeah.
Okay.
I went to, I think it's Napogue was the name of the castle. And so it was a medieval castle that we had a banquet in. And there was a little bit of a show. And so interestingly, two of the folks, Jody, did you go for this? Or did you set this one out? Okay. So there were two of the folks on our tour that ended up getting to be in the show. And they were like visiting royalty in part of the show. And so they sat at a different table and just kind of held court over the banquet. And so we were served like a 4-course meal during that time, and songs, dance, poetry, that sort of stuff. There was when you came in, you were given this little clay cup of mead that was super good. Mead is like a honey wine. And then throughout the meal, they had like red wine, white wine, fruit punch, water, that sort of stuff. And then I can't remember what the first course was. It might have been a salad. And then we had tomato soup, and then chicken and rice, and then the dessert. And all of that was just, it was delicious. And it was just really neat, again, like the Cliffs of Moher, something so old and that it, had been there and stood the test of time. To be a part of that was really cool. And I think about half of our tour went on that and the other half stayed back.
Yeah, so Jody and I cruised the streets of Limerick, and I don't know. Jody, I thought that was pretty cool. We kind of covered street art areas, some waterfront. Got to see a denture shop. I'd never really seen one of those sitting on the street, but dentures in the front window as your marketing thing. So. Some old churches and such. What was your takeaway from Limerick?
Oh, not much more than that. I mean, it was an interesting older city, and actually, the picture that you have up there, I think street art is a really cool thing to collect pictures of. But those people behind us were actually playing ping pong on outdoor tables.
Yeah, and I've seen those before, but not very often. And it seemed like a pretty common occurrence there that was a gathering for, I guess they seemed college age and older people.
It was on the edge of a campus, wasn't it?
It was on the edge of.
Past there was a college campus.
But super, super talented area. And then I think after you went up to catch up on the rest of your day, I went back out and walked around a little bit, and it had more of Limerick where I was walking, had more of that Dublin feel in terms of the big city. There were lots of restaurants and pubs and places to shop and stuff like that. I did find a place that was selling the Mr. Beast burger. So I don't know if you two know who Mr. Beast is, but he he created some franchises to sell his special high-end burger, and I think now he's suing some of those places because they're not up to his standards. So
Well,
interesting.
part of that, when we were out walking, we walked a couple blocks with the guy. I won't say we were lost, but let's just say
You were lost.
we were being uncertain about which direction we were going. But we walked a couple of blocks with a guy who had a little kid with him. They were on their way to a football game, and
Yeah.
he obviously figured out real quickly that we were Americans, and so he was telling us how he was an American football fan and had been in Boston, and he was Limerick, born and bred.
And what was his favorite team? I forget, Jody. What was it?
Oh, I don't know. Some team. I don't know. I think they're in Ohio. It starts with a P. I don't know.
I believe.
Those are the Green Bay Packers. I know
Yeah,
that.
he and I bonded over being Pittsburgh Steelers fans. So
I
but
will
they were.
say. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say they were going to a soccer match that night,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Yeah.
The spoiled person in the group loved the part in Limerick where there was a fan in the hotel room and a rubber ducky on the bathtub.
Ah, yes.
Yep. That was
That
nice.
rubber ducky might be in my bathroom now.
Well, and wasn't in Cary where there was a rubber duck store?
Yes, I have one of those rubber ducks too.
Yeah, I got her one of those rubber ducks at
That's
the
a
rubber
flamingo
duck store.
rubber duck.
Yeah. So the next morning we got up and we headed towards Galway. So we ended up in Galway proper and had time for a couple of tours there.
Oh, that's where we saw the drum maker, Jody. Talk about that.
Well, right. That was actually
That was the second day.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
yeah. Well, we can do that, but Galway. I remarked, and I think I said it to you guys when we were walking down that really busy street. I realized it wasn't on Saturday. I think we were there on a Saturday, but even so, for a city of whatever it is, 80 or 85,000, something like that, it was incredibly active and busy. Just tons of stuff going on.
I
That's
think
an
this is
interesting
where
thing you got up there.
TNT did all the shopping that they had to buy another suitcase to bring all their haul in.
Yeah. So what was the name of this cathedral?
That was the Galway Cathedral.
It was the Galway Cathedral.
And it was a newer cathedral. It didn't have quite as much history, but it was absolutely beautiful.
The floors were stunning.
It had that Connemara marble in it.
Right.
Yeah, you had several photos of that.
I did. And the photo that you have up there, yes, that is John F. Kennedy. They were big fans of John Fitzgerald Kennedy.
It was
Which I
interesting.
found interesting that people talked about that throughout.
Yeah, Marion's take on that was very interesting. She talked about that on the bus, and she kind of did a hand up moment, like, we don't care what you think politically. We love John Fitzgerald Kennedy because to us, it was a rise above. It was his family survived all of this madness, and he rose to greatness in the free world, and so they really do revere him just for his rise in the political field.
Yeah. And then we also had a river tour that day.
And that was really cool.
So on the river Carib.
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 Loch Carib, I think is what they called it. LOCH. Loch Carib.
So I thought that the guys that did the commentary there were there was a lot of people talking, but I enjoyed listening to them. They had a lot of good, useful information.
I went up to the top on that tour, and I actually sat with Eddie, the bus driver, and we had talked on the bus about funerals and how those are experienced in Ireland. And so I wanted his real take on that, like not the tourist take on that about, like, how much whiskey was involved. But it turns out that, I mean, what Marion talked about on the bus was really how many of their funerals take place. They are an actual wake where you're greeted with a shot of whiskey at the door and a shot of whiskey at the casket and a shot of whiskey throughout, and just lots of memories, lots of celebrating, lots of coming together over the course of time. 2 or 3 days of that, which from my experience as a funeral director, all of those gatherings, like, that is really what helps you through the grief process. And so to see that a country like Ireland still embraces all of that was really cool to me. And he also made this, I'm sorry, he made this interesting comment about how funeral license work in Ireland, and that if I owned a mortuary, that I would have to sell you my license, that you couldn't just come up and pitch up a tent and open a mortuary. Like, you would have had to have assumed someone's license from that. So that was very interesting for me.
I stayed on a little later and went to far southwest Ireland to visit a friend. And the day that I got there, he invited me to go to a funeral the next day if I wanted to. And he was ambivalent. He was like, he would go if I wasn't there, but we chose not to. But he described it the same way. It was very interesting. And it was a person who was, well known and respected in the community, but they had been clearing the hedgerows and getting everything ready. And we went through before the funeral in the morning, and then we came back late in the afternoon, and he was saying, "Oh, those are people who are just now leaving from the funeral."
Eddie talked about going to a mate's mother's funeral, and he was like, I felt like I should show my face because he was my mate. And so he rolled up, and he was there for hours and hours and hours, and he was like, just dozens and dozens and dozens to 100, hundreds of people came through during the course of the day, and reminisced and had a time together and had food and that sort of stuff, and just that camaraderie.
Absolutely. So the next day, I decided to city dwell, as Jenny likes to say. I'm the city mouse. She's the
I'm the country mouse.
We missed one part though.
What's that?
Well, when did we go to the Abbey?
That's what I'm saying.
That's what he's about to get to.
Yeah. So the second day,
that's right.
You all headed out to the Connemara region.
I will say we went 62.4 miles an hour across back roads to get to the Connemara region, dodging sheep.
Yeah, I am greatly saddened that I decided to stay in the city that day and not be on the back of a bus that was rocking across small back roads. But Jody, lead us through that day. Well, I know there were a number of things that stood out.
Well, it was really funny because the first part of the drive out, I was thinking, oh, Mark wouldn't have minded this. It was fine. And then we took a little left turn, and the roads got A, quite narrow, and B, yes, there were sheep, and C, very windy. And lo and behold, and I was kind of thrilled by this, we wound up in a little town that I had been in, Roundstone. But what we did in Roundstone I hadn't done before, so it was very interesting. We went to and I think it's Bull Run. You have to roll the R a little bit. The Irish drums that are played with a beater, sometime with two ends on the beater, and we went to a master Bull Run maker, and he didn't really tell us very much about how the instruments are made, to be frank. Did you think?
To be frank.
we didn't learn much about how they were made, but he did talk about, they're a spirit instrument and that
And that they're
sort of
played
thing.
from your gut.
Yeah, he was actually quite a
His name was
character.
Malachi.
Malachi, yeah,
Malachi.
Malachi, and
Malachi
in Ireland,
Kearns.
his name is, what was his first name?
Malachi
Malachi is
Oh, that's
Malachi
his first
Kearns.
name.
Kearns.
That's right.
Kearns.
And so in Ireland, they call him Malachi Bahran. Um, and I I took a picture, or had somebody take a picture with him outside, and he found out that I have an Irish surname. I told him my name was McCann, and he said, "Oh, they're all gangsters." I have no idea what he meant, but
Maybe you're related to
I
Eddie.
found him really, really interesting, and part of his operation has something to do with, there's a foundation in that town that promotes music, and we had been to a dance and music competition in that town when we were in Ireland. No, I don't know. I want to say 6-8 years ago, something like that. So it was very interesting, and I found him interesting to talk to.
He was super interesting. It should also be said that he created the drums for Riverdance, the original show.
Sting, U2 uses his
Yeah.
drums. I mean,
Yeah. So
yeah,
he's created drums for lots of famous people. And he was just talking about how it's a dying art because things can be created, mass produced for so inexpensively. But these were handmade, created instruments that were just beautiful sounds. And we sat in his workshop, which was quite an experience.
it was.
And I think we had coffee there too, coffee and tea there. But he was a really interesting man, and I feel like the more time we could have spent with him, the more stories we would have learned. He
Oh
also
yeah.
tried to marry off his son to one of the gals that was on our trip. His
Yes,
name was
he
Gucci.
did.
His
He
son's name was
did. Yeah,
Gucci.
a rugby player.
Yeah.
So we spent the night in Galway that night.
But we also went to Kylemore Abbey.
Oh yeah,
Oh
I
yeah,
forgot
yeah,
about
yeah.
that.
That was
Yeah,
beautiful. That was
It
beautiful.
was very beautiful. Huge grounds. A, a a really big garden. I don't know. Did you walk up there or
I
take
did,
the
yeah. It was
little
absolutely
bus?
beautiful, and they had this really cute little fairy garden that was a part of that also.
Yeah.
Um, all of the grounds were just immaculate, and we had lunch there. They had a nice little cafeteria there where you could get all sorts of food. We should probably talk about the food that we had in Ireland because it was absolutely delish.
Yep, there were a couple that were quite memorable. I also walked up to the little chapel, and in the chapel, it it's it had tons of the Connemara marble in it in different colors.
Yeah.
But there was a woman giving a harp concert while I was up there, so that was a lot of fun.
The grounds of Kylemore Abbey were absolutely amazing. Just
Unbelievable.
all
Yeah.
of the trees and the flowers and the foliage and the lake and just the pictures from that were amazing. And Mark, I don't think I've sent you any of those, so we don't have any to share. But it was a gorgeous vista from there.
And I didn't ever tell you this, Mark. I was walking out of one of the actual thing that was the Abbey, and now they're building a new Abbey, and that Abbey was really someone's home. And I was walking out the front door, and this guy says, "Hey, Wisconsin," and I sort of looked around and remember the guy that we talked to when we were way out on the spit where the ferry was. We had a nice chat with this
yeah.
guy. Well, he was at the Abbey
Ah,
and
okay.
recognized me. We chatted a few more minutes.
Yeah, yeah, I remember him. So that night we stayed again in Galway. A good segue. So you all mentioned uh, food. So maybe Jody, what were your favorite couple of meals that we had?
One thing when we were going to the cliffs of of more. Both Eddie and Marion said, don't get food in there. So we stopped at this little place that was just, if it was a cafeteria line, it was probably only 20 or 30 feet long. But actually, the meal that I had there, I had a salmon salad. Every single vegetable in that salad was really fresh, I believe mostly local, and and the piece of salmon was spectacular. It was really, really good. Had some good fish and chips a few places too. And then go ahead.
Jenny, what about you?
So I was pleasantly surprised at the breakfast. I have the palate of a 9-year-old, so I might have had a box of peanut butter crackers in my suitcase, but I really didn't have to rely on them. So I was pleasantly surprised with that. The breakfasts were really cool, just in the fact that they had like meats and cheeses that you're not used to in the States. So there was ham available every morning. Bacon rashers were a little bit different. They were a little harder to get used to, but still very tasty. Wonderful, tasty croissants every morning. And I'm gonna admit that I have had hot tea every day, multiple times a day since we've returned home from Ireland. So that has been rekindled in my spirit. There was a time when I drank lots of hot tea, but now I'm definitely back on it.
How about that broccoli soup?
You know what? I detest broccoli. If you made me bite into a head of broccoli, I would probably gag. But there was broccoli soup that was it was pureed, and it was so wonderfully seasoned that it was just absolutely delicious. It was warm and just so flavorful that I ate half the bowl of it. And when I say I ate half the bowl, that was a lot because many of the meals that we shared together, we had 3 and 4 courses of that meal. So there was plenty of food to be had. And then honestly, when we ate at Murphy's Pub, the 3 of us, I think we were roaming through Galway, and it was just like, I need to use the bathroom and I need a snack. And I was like, do you have a lunch menu? And he was like, we have Toasties. And I was like, okay, tell me what a Toastie is. And it was literally a toasted ham and cheese sandwich. And I was like, sign me up, I'll have one. So a ham and cheese toastie and a cider tided me over very well.
And strange as it sounds, they're crisp, or as we like to say, potato chips, were really good every place that we had them.
So Whitney actually got sour cream and what was it? Sour cream and shamrock or something like that. That were just delicious chips or crisps.
So I guess what you're saying is the last night in Galway wasn't your favorite meal.
No, I might have gone back to the room and ordered a $20 cheeseburger on room service. That might have been my one splurge food-wise of the whole trip. But that was the only issue. That was the only issue for me. And it was just that I don't like dark chicken. So it was all on me, not on them. It was a lovely meal. The desserts were great. The starters were great. But it wasn't to my liking.
Yeah, I had a salad without salad dressing because all of theirs were vinaigrettes that had things on my no-fly list. But it was a potato salad, and it was
literally
with
cold potatoes on it.
half done potatoes, and I hadn't had anything green all week, and it was very good. It was surprisingly good. So we left Galway and rolled into Dublin for our last.
One more quick thing about Galway. When we walked into that really big record store, they had the I think the where they had the biggest section of records, and I think it was basically categorized as just other. I just did a little poking around, and it turned out that they had Willie Nelson's new album, and the W's, it was alphabetical by performer. In the W's, they had both Don Williams and Hank Williams. So I thought that was really great.
That they had they had all sorts of cool had all sorts of cool albums in there, stuff I like. And I took a picture of one. I have a friend that he and I both like the Electric Light Orchestra and big fans. And they had one of the ELO albums. It was had all the hits on it. It was super cool. So yeah, I'm glad you brought the record store up.
I took a picture where I took the Hank Williams album cover and another Hank Williams that was in there, and a Don Williams. So the Williams boys are popular in Galway.
Well represented for sure. Yeah. So the next morning we got up and I guess mostly highway driving. We stopped at another place to shop as we were heading out of Galway. Was that the place that had sweaters and jewelry? Or was that coming out of Killarney?
That was coming out of
Killarney.
Headed to Killarney. That was
Okay.
that. Yeah.
So when we got into Dublin, we were all looking at maybe not doing what they called the panoramic tour because it was just sitting on a bus, and things changed. The itinerary changed, and the guide that was supposed to cover that changed, and so Marianne stayed with us. And so those of us that were going to get off and do our own thing decided to stay on because she promised some cool stuff, and she delivered on that. So we got the tour. Went by Trinity College, which the library was under renovation.
It was being renovated, like the books were being dusted or something like that. So many of the books had been removed. I think there were several of us that would have liked to have seen Trinity, and mostly the Book of Kells, and it wasn't available to be viewed. So the trip before, they were able to partake in that, but not this trip. So we'll do that the next time we're in Ireland.
And then we stopped and had lunch. I thought this is not my thing necessarily, but I thought it was so massive and so cool. So we visited Phoenix Park, which is the largest public park in Europe, and I thought
the Pope has visited there too.
Yeah, I mean it's super cool. Like the President of Ireland lives in a mansion in the park, and lots of other things. But Jody and I did some walking around. We didn't have our meal or snack, and did some walking around, and there were cool gardens, there were cool paths, there were soccer or football fields, there were places to play cricket. I thought it was really neat that in such an urban area that this green space existed.
It was interesting to see some of the folks from here that, we're in a rural area. And so Jim Bush, who is a farmer and a producer, he kind of walked through with some of us, and he was like, this is that, and that's this, and this is this. And so things that you wouldn't have recognized in those gardens were growing. So it was kind of neat to have him along for that part of it.
There's also one of the coolest trees I've ever seen in my life. Mark and I walked by this tree, and I took a picture, but the picture didn't really do it justice. I don't even know what kind of tree it was. Some kind of evergreen, wasn't it?
It was, and my pictures didn't. When I looked at them later, I'm like, it was way better in person.
Yeah, I got one that's kind of, well, at least it was interesting enough that Peggy said, wow, that's a really cool tree. But this tree was growing up from the ground in a number of places. And what would you say, Mark? There were probably 20 or 25 people in little groups inside the tree. It was amazing. I've never seen a tree like that.
Yeah, it was super cool, and it seemed like it was catching everybody's eye because the lots of people stopped there. And then we loaded back on the bus and headed to the Irish Immigration Museum known as Epic. And with the exception of the school kids that didn't have good chaperones, the chaperones were actually more annoying than the kids. Um, but I enjoyed that a lot because you got it was interactive and you got to see a little more of the history of, or as Jenny described earlier, the genocide that happened along the way, and then the history of Irish people and kind of stars of today and yesterday that are or public figures or artists or creative people that have Irish heritage, and so I thought that was super cool. What
I
about you
think
all?
it was summed up pretty much as Ireland's impact on the world.
Yeah,
And so to see, like some people, it's easy enough, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, Fitzgerald, they're from Ireland. But like there were vocalists and there were radio personalities and movie stars and broadcast stars.
Inventors, scientists.
yeah,
Yeah, inventors, yeah, and just the real impact that Ireland had had on the world. And I think some folks may have thought when we were going into that and talking about immigration that it might have been people coming into Ireland, and I think they kind of discounted this museum, but it was amazingly impactful to me to see the impact. I mean, the epic impact that Ireland has had on the world, and how many influences there are in all of our cultures because of Ireland.
The impact of the Irish diaspora. I mean, it's amazing.
Yes, yes, absolutely. It was a very interactive museum, which was really cool. And like Mark said, I mean, and don't get me wrong, the kids needed to see that as much as us old folks needed to see that. But the museum curators did an amazing job of making you want to see what was on display.
yeah, for sure. Immigration is a hot topic in the United States, and it seems it seems lost on. We're frequently, referred to as the ugly Americans, and I think we've earned every bit of that sort of angst from people outside of our country, and we're up in arms over issues that people aren't really up in arms over in the rest of the world, and the neon sign that said "We all come from somewhere" really struck me as here in the United States, nobody's from here, and when I say
Nobody,
nobody, almost nobody is literally from here, and all
especially
of that,
nobody with pale skin like mine is from here.
right, and all of our ancestors immigrated from other countries across the world that had older civilizations, and they were welcomed into the United States. I realize that there are all sorts of stories of strife and things throughout our history with the way some people immigrated, but by and large, it's not as it wasn't as burdensome from a public relations standpoint as it is today. So I thought that was a cool message that the impact that they've had on the world.
So it's interesting. Your picture says we all come from somewhere, and my last photo of this trip, aside from on the airplane, was that Ireland never leaves you. And they both came from that same museum.
Yeah, so super cool. So we had a gourmet dinner that night at I'm going to call a greasy spoon that was a mix of American chicken fingers, hamburgers, Jody, and Indian food.
Middle Eastern,
Middle
Indian.
Eastern. Yeah,
it was a strange amalgamation of food.
And then they had like big brownies for sale for dessert and stuff. So it was an odd menu, but I think at that point we were
I would have eaten
tired.
from a vending machine at that point.
Yeah, tired, hungry, and ready to relax. So I think, did we miss anything that either of you wanted to cover about Ireland?
I would say a couple of things that I took away was if you're traveling to Ireland, things to be prepared for is that not all of the hotels have washcloths. Seems to be a luxury. That drinks are different. With your meal, you mostly have water, and at the end of the meal, you have coffee or tea. But that sodas are not like they are in the United States, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. There are no, 64-ounce big slurps available in Ireland. And if you want a 64-ounce big slurp, you're going to pay through the nose for it. But the other part of that is that their folks are probably much healthier because of it. And I was incredibly impressed with recycling throughout all of Ireland. There were sorted recycling bins every handful of steps on every hotel floor, all throughout the streets, especially in Dublin. There were folks whose jobs it were to pick up that recycling and that trash, and you saw that frequently. I will say that on this trip, I felt incredibly safe. I never felt like I was in any sort of danger or going to be pickpocketed or anything like that. Probably in Dublin, there were some opportunities for that, but not where we were. And if you're a woman and you're going to Ireland, make sure you know the difference between an adapter plug and a converter adapter plug, because anything that runs on a motor needs a converter in addition to an adapter. That's my shameless plug.
Well, it was actually interesting. The bathrooms all had those shaver-only plugs, so that you couldn't put the grounded adapter in there.
Yeah. Now, luckily, several of the hotels, 2 or 3 of them, enough to make a difference, had hair dryers in the room with the appropriate plugs. But if that wasn't the case, I would have been struggling. But my fan worked. My fan worked everywhere.
Jody, anything else from your perspective?
Well, just a couple of things. One, I did go on and do a little more traveling, and I will say, when you rent a car, be prepared, because not only do you drive on the other side of the road, unless you want to really pay through the nose, you're going to drive a standard transmission car, and it takes a lot of concentration. It was fun. It was actually a ton of fun. One of the things that we missed on our trip, because it was so rainy, I did go to a place where there was a sheepdog demonstration, and I would recommend that anybody do that. And I'm really sorry that we missed that day that it was raining. In fact, that was really the rainiest day that we had when we were there. Other than that, I don't know. I had a good time. It was a little different for me because everybody else knew each other, or certainly knew of each other. So I was the odd person out, but I thought I was treated really well by everyone, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, and you sat with people other than us a number of times, like for meals and stuff.
On purpose. And I don't know if you know this, but I bought Shelby and Mackenzie's ticket to that performance.
No, I didn't.
Because they were considering not going, and I was like, nah, you really should go. So I did that, and I'm
Well,
glad.
that's cool. Yeah, that's cool.
Mackenzie
So,
graduated with my son, and she seems like she has grown into, like, so interestingly, you were talking about the sheepdogs. So in the 5th grade, we all took a class field trip to Kentucky Down Under where we saw a sheepdog demonstration. And so we joked about that, look, this is like Kentucky Down Under, but in Ireland. And so to see her grow into this really unique young lady and to be a part of this trip was a really cool experience for me.
yeah, I thought the diversity of the people that went was super cool.
Yep.
Looking forward to the
And
next
Trace
one.
looked good in that Irish cap.
Didn't he? He
should
looked like a
wear
little
it.
Peaky Blinders.
He should wear it all the time.
Yeah, yeah. So we haven't seen him, or I haven't seen him since
He'll be
the
here
trip.
tomorrow night.
So yeah, he'll probably be in costume tomorrow night, being that it's Halloween. But
He should dress up as Peaky Blinders.
he could dress up as Peaky Blinders. Yep, for sure. So good deal, Will.
Mark, real quick before we
Yep.
end this, talk about your experience with not really looking forward to this type of travel, but having enjoyed it.
Okay,
I have one more thing too.
sure. So for anybody so I'm a card carrying introvert.
I'm not.
I don't like people. I don't like groups. I'm different than both Jody and Jenni in that regard, and I'm also like to be in charge and kind of
Control freak.
control freak. And so I wanted to go, but I was apprehensive. And I would say I would do this kind of travel anytime the opportunity presents itself. Now it was comfortable for me. I enjoyed being dropped off at places, not having to fight crowds, not having to get our own tickets, being dropped at the front door of a venue, the front door of a hotel, the front door of a restaurant when we were traveling or shopping places, and being able to enjoy the experience of it all versus the hassle of the travel on your own part and do that. You could not pay me to drive a standard vehicle on the opposite side of the road on curvy roads with people like Eddie driving
Coming at you.
Luxury
buses.
motor coaches.
Yeah, and having to deal with that. So I was my apprehension was unfounded, and in fact, I really enjoyed that kind of travel. And our next trip will be a tad different, but I absolutely will jump back on and do another one of these, like the Ireland trip, the year after that, if that's what we look like. Jody, what was the thing you thought about?
Well, one thing that was different this time, as opposed to when I went 7 or 8 years ago, 8 or 9 years ago, whenever it was. Mark, you talked about your no-fly list where certain foods are concerned. I was blown away in virtually every restaurant. Every dish had a list of allergens, and I talked to a woman actually on the flight on the way back who was a scientist who dealt with a lot of food stuff, and she said that they've gotten really very serious about that. And I would say for anybody who has allergies that it's really concerned with that can be life threatening or put you in the hospital, it was spectacular. I mean, it was really amazing how far they've taken that. And having had a brother that was super allergic to lots of things and could have really bad reactions, it seemed like it was really interesting and really well done.
It was
Well,
much better there than in the States.
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
and along those lines, Jody, I think I'd been in the hospital over there. I did have some food allergies arise from the last meal on the flight, and if I had followed that up with fish and chips at one of our first big meals, I would have absolutely had a significant problem because I got pretty sick anyway. So I found, I mean, there were things that I would have ordered throughout the trip that I did not order because of having that allergens list, and so it was very helpful for me. Jenny, did you have another follow up?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Just to say that my experience with Indus was really amazing. There were a couple little bumps in the road, but I think that's to be expected with anything that you plan, and especially if you take 25 people abroad, like you're going to have some sort of challenge. I got really apprehensive when we were leaving Cincinnati and delayed, and I thought, oh, this is the part where they crucify me, but it wasn't. They were very kind to our group. They had already made accommodations for our group. We knew that we had a flight one way or another when we got to Newark. I was a little apprehensive when we landed in Dublin, and I wasn't sure where to meet. Our bus driver that took us to the hotel was a little bit different than our bus driver on the trip, and so I was a bit apprehensive about that, but that all worked out very well too. So 1,000%, if you are a chamber executive director, I would absolutely recommend Indus Travel to you. They did a wonderful job, so I'm really looking forward to our next October trip. We're going to visit Europe again. We're going to do Germany, Switzerland, Amsterdam,
France.
and France on a riverboat cruise where you get to unpack once on the boat instead of on this trip with Ireland. We did multiple hotels, so you'll get to unpack once on the boat, have the same room, and they'll transport you as you sleep to the different locations. So
We saw the cathedral in Dublin. Let me tell you, when you go to Cologne and see the cathedral in Cologne, it's mind blowing.
Yeah.
So we've been watching those videos, Jody, on YouTube to get, and that's one of those UNESCO sites as well that I guess the Cliffs of Moher are, and just wow, some of the stuff we've already seen. So I always end the podcast. First, thank you both for joining me. But I always ask where people can find out more about you if they want to online. And so, Jenny, you mentioned the upcoming trip. So if people wanted to join us for the riverboat tour on the Rhine in October 2024, how would they find out about that? Where would they find the Owen County Chamber of Commerce and information about that?
So 2 places, mostly on Facebook. We are Owen County KY Chamber, not to be confused with Owen County, Indiana. So on Facebook, Owen County KY Chamber. And then we have a website, owencountykychamber.com, and information will be there under the Participate tab on that. But it's not up yet, but it will be forthcoming. We don't quite have the brochure together just yet, but we do have the trip planned, and I think it'll depart October 10th of 2024, and it'll be a 10-day tour, and that final night will be an overnight in Amsterdam, Switzerland,
in Basel, Switzerland.
In Basel, Switzerland. Thank you, Mark. I think I've had too much Jameson tonight to have all of those details in order. But Basel, Switzerland, will have a overnight there, the last night of that tour. So there'll be more information forthcoming on that. Thank you.
And Jody, you have a radio show. Tell us more about that and where we can listen.
A radio show, and actually, I don't do a lot of social media. I try to stay a little off the grid, but I do have a radio show here in the small town in Wisconsin that I live in. It's WVMO, which is 987, and my program is 987 Countdown to Country, and you can find WVMO on the web, and we do webcasting. So if you're ever looking for something to do on a Thursday morning, look it up, 98.7 WVMO, the voice of Monona.
And
roots country music.
And how long have you been doing that, Jody?
I've actually, that station has been on the air since 2014, and I was one of the first people to have a show on the station. So small station, but it's a small station that's really got a big heart. It's been the large market Wisconsin station of the year, radio station of the year, the last 3 years. So it's a lot of fun. And before that, I worked for a community station in Madison.
And
Something to do after retirement.
yeah, and Jody, I know, spends a lot of time creating his shows and putting a lot of care and feeding into them. So if you have a chance, give him a listen. Once again, I appreciate you two joining us. I'll put your information and links in our show notes for anybody that wants to grab them on the various platforms. Those show notes will be there, and I think we will be done until the next time we want to get together and talk about one of our travel shows or tech or culture or anything else. So see you all later.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Bye, Jen. Bye, Mark.
Bye-bye. Bye, Jody. Take care.